Hello, everybody, and welcome to Sarah Payton's course, Transforming the Critical Inner Voice, that is being sponsored by the NVC Academy. So wonderful to have you here with us. So let me tell you, you're in the right place. If you wish you could be kinder or more compassionate to yourself and less judgmental. If it seems easier to you to give empathy to other people rather than receive it back. And maybe it seems that way sometimes, and maybe even a lot of times. If you'd like to be more relaxed and have more kindness for your body, but you have a tendency to be critical of it and judge how it looks or how it moves, or maybe you're critical of its aches and pains. If you have a tendency to keep yourself busy with TV or social media or work, but what you really want to do is just have more time for being. And if you'd love to have a relaxing meditation practice, but instead it feels painful or even kind of excruciating to sit with yourself in stillness for that long. Or maybe you have a committed meditation practice, but struggle with finding self-compassion when you're off the cushion. Or maybe you'd like to stop using mind-altering substances like comfort food or alcohol, or even marijuana or some other substance. If you can say yes to any of these things, then you're in the right place and you're in for a lovely workshop tonight. So I want to start by introducing myself. My name is Mary McKenzie, and I'm the co-founder of the NVC Academy and a certified trainer of nonviolent communication, and also a mediator. And the NVC Academy is sponsoring this event, and so it's wonderful to be here with you tonight. And I'm going to introduce Sarah a little bit later. So I wanted to tell you about an aha moment I had because it relates to the course tonight. So I remember the moment in time when I understood that if I was judgmental or disapproving or unloving towards myself, that it actually created a barrier between me and other people. And in that barrier, it was impossible for me to be fully loving or fully open to another person. And I'd understood this in the opposite. Like, for instance, I understood that if I was judgmental of other people, that would create a barrier between us, and it would be hard to be honest and loving. But I really didn't understand that the same dynamic holds true if I'm judgmental of myself. And the time that I noticed this, I was having kind of a tough time in my life. This was many years ago. And I was talking to a friend about it, and she was really being loving and forthcoming and supportive. But I didn't believe her. And I was feeling so badly about myself that I couldn't let her love in. And then I noticed that I started actually judging her about different things. And that's when I really got it, the value and the real importance of me actually extending compassion to myself. And when I can do that, I have more openness to others. It's very similar to what the Dalai Lama says in this quote, that if your compassion doesn't include yourself, it's incomplete. If your compassion doesn't include yourself, it's incomplete. So I'm happy to tell you that that is the topic of this course tonight. And so I'm certain that you're going to walk away with a lot of information, a lot of skills that will support you in your life. One of the skills that I'm hoping you'll develop are an ability to hear what your inner critical voice is saying, and differentiate between that critical voice and your own feelings of shame. And also to develop skills in better understanding the needs behind that critical voice and how to empathize with the needs that it's looking for so that you can extend your healing even more. Our hope is that you will experience relief and even a little bit of healing in today's call, and that you'll be inspired to sign up for Sarah Payton's upcoming course, the 6-session course, Your Resonant Self, Transforming the Critical Inner Voice, that starts in a week. So let's first of all get started. I'd like to start by introducing Sarah. I first met Sarah earlier this year, actually, when we did a 9-day training with a group of other trainers. So Sarah Payton is a certified trainer like me of nonviolent communication through the Center for Nonviolent Communication, and she's also a neuroscience educator. She focuses on integrating brain science and the use of resonant language to heal trauma. And she brings together depth work and self-compassion that integrate interpersonal neurobiology with the transformative potential of nonviolent communication. So Sarah is known for bringing those two programs together. She teaches and lectures internationally and is the author of the book, Your Resonant Self, Guided Meditations and Exercises to Engage Your Brain's Capacity for Healing. So it's my great pleasure to introduce Sarah to you. And Sarah, welcome. Glad you're here.
Thank you. And thank you, Robin, for unmuting me. I'm so glad to be here, I was just saying. And I'm just pulling up our wonderful slideshow so that that's now visible. Did I share my screen, Mary?
Yes, you did.
Excellent. Oh, it's such a relief. Okay. Oh, here we go. So here we are with me back before I met Nonviolent Communication, when I kind of lived in a landscape of disconnected shame. It was really intense. And there's a lot that has to do with having really intense voices of shame and having intense experiences of loneliness and of a kind of trauma. Any kind of trauma will impact us and take us towards a tendency towards shame. But loneliness in particular, the experience of not being really accompanied, is something that takes us towards shame quite intensely. So in my state of living in shame, I almost didn't even know that I had a critical voice. It just felt like living a bit like living in a kind of a sick syrup all the time. It was almost like I was breathing shame. I was feeling it. It was hard to inhale fully. It was kind of hard to feel a lot of energy in my life. I just kept going. I had a tremendous capacity to pick up my one foot and put it in front of the other. But it was not an easy experience. During that time, I didn't even know, I couldn't even hear that self-critical voice quite. It took a little while, it took a little empathy, in fact, before I actually began to hear the voice that was beating me up. So there are two steps that are a part of this experience of coming out of the self-critical voice. And it may be that you guys are all already in step 2, where you're actually hearing it because you came to this class. But just wanting to start myself where I started. What I realized was that if I listened carefully enough, I could start to hear what I was saying, what the judgments were that I had against myself. And then what I started to learn was that there was an incredible combination of warmth and precision in language that took me toward myself and toward, oh God, I love that phrase actually, took me toward myself. Because one of the wonderful things about the human nervous system is that if we are suffering from self-criticism, we actually have very little idea what our true kind of fully unfolded, organically developed self is supposed to be. Because the way the human nervous system works, when we're taking those hits all the time, we don't really get to be ourselves. So there's this wonderful discovery process that if you're involved in this work, if you've found my book, if you're working with nonviolent communication, then you are already on this journey that frees the human nervous system. Wow, it's just kind of a magical thing. And what happened was that I started to understand little by little that I could actually live in a very different state than the state of shame or the state of active self-criticism, that I could live my life in a state of more or less continual peace. which would have sounded really absurd to me about 10 years ago. I would have gone, what the hell is her talking about? How can she be saying these things? I've been there with you, Sarah. I know that peace was not possible then. So it was sort of would have made me kind of feel nauseous, I think, at that point to hear myself saying this. And I also learned that when I fell into shame again, or when I fell into those habits of self-criticism, I could develop community resources, people that I could count on. We could count on each other to pull ourselves out of this shame spot. So what happened for me was that I discovered nonviolent communication, and I had at that time just adopted with my husband a beautiful 15-year-old son who had been living on the streets. So he had a lot of trauma, and I had a lot of trauma, and I really wanted to be able to hug him. I felt like he really needed hugs, and I couldn't hug him. And I was like, why can I not hug this beautiful boy who needs hugs? So I was at a nonviolent communication workshop because I just discovered it. And I started to, in an empathy circle, I started to talk about what trouble I was having. And people, instead of telling me that I was crazy or wrong, or that I shouldn't be thinking that, or that it obviously showed there was something wrong with me, which was what I was expecting to hear back, instead, they started making these needs guesses. And it was like a magic experience. I would go into the sea of shame and into the sorrow and into the despair and into the hopelessness, and people would make needs guesses, and I would pop out of those waves and look around and feel the next wave of hopelessness and despair and go back in, and people would make needs guesses. I was stunned. I came out of that experience actually realizing at the end of the empathy that what was happening was that I had a body memory of reaching for my mom when I was about 2 years old. I could feel my little toddler body reaching out to her and wanting her to hug me, and her body stiffening. My mom had a ton of trauma. She wasn't trying to stiffen, but it was just something that her body did when you reached for her. I think she just expected she was going to be hurt, even if it was her 2-year-old. So I had this internalized sense of a terrible shame that I never wanted to experience again. It was almost like in that moment of being 2, I stopped reaching out. And my longing to reach out to this beautiful boy that we had adopted brought me smack up against my own shame, not to mention my own self-criticism. And so coming out of that experience, I ended up being able to hug my 15-year-old, and we had a very sweet, sweet connection that persisted through the many years. Many of you know me, and you know that that the trauma that he had before he came to live with us took him out, that he died of alcoholism at the age of 33, and I was unable to save that boy, but I wanted to. And certainly the material that I learned and all this book that I wrote and everything that I have put together in the effort to create enough safety and warmth and precision to heal trauma. Certainly, that's in a way his gift to me and to everybody else that comes into contact with this work. So, my beautiful boy, Ben. This isn't a picture of him and me, obviously. This is just some stock photograph, but that's sweet to see anyway. So what happened to me is that I started to really wonder, what is NVC about? How can empathy do what it does? What happened to my brain? Because I am a person who loves to understand why things work. So again, there are many of you who know me on this call, and you know how much I love the way that neuroscience, especially the neuroscience of the last 15 or 20 years, has taken us into a deeper and deeper understanding of the way that brains work in relationship. Here's a picture of a boy in trouble, which is, I think I'm off on the slides a little bit there, but here's the research, the vast amounts of research that we have been working with, and that I've been working with in terms of how can we understand nonviolent communication, and how can we use this understanding to leverage our empathy skills and to leverage the way that we talk to ourselves. Now, many of you may have no connection with nonviolent communication whatsoever, The main technology that I'm going to be offering you in this call and thinking about while we're working is the idea that we can name feelings, and that contrary to our own brain's expectations, we actually feel better when we start to name feelings. Although research shows that people never expect it's going to make them feel better, although it does. And then naming needs, this word in nonviolent communication being those deep longings that are shared by all humans, that everybody's got. And it turns out that when we name feelings and we name needs, we're actually lighting up the relational part of the brain, the right hemisphere. We're lighting that part of the brain up, and we're creating access to growth and healing and fluidity and change, where if we stay in our self-critical witness, which is over here in the left side of the brain, we stay stuck. It's a static place. It is not a fluid place, that left hemisphere with its self-criticism. So one of the major skills that I'm just going to offer you right now, I'll move the slides forward a minute here. There we go. One of the major skills that I want to offer you right now is that when we turn toward ourselves with gentleness, with warmth, with precision, we're turning away from the self-critical witness. We're actually moving into a different brain area. So the first thing I'd like to offer is that we all turn towards our self-critical witness with a little healthy skepticism. And we say to that self-critical witness, why do you think that I would believe you, a person that has no sense of mercy, that has no capacity for compassion, that has no capacity for understanding and appreciating humans? We all carry this inside of ourselves. We carry this self-critical witness that's trying so hard to help us. It's trying so hard to help us, and it can't help us. And if we rely on it, we're just kind of stuck in self-criticism. Something else gets born as we begin to do this work, as we begin to move into this area of understanding of humans and understanding of language. What happens is that right hemisphere starts to come alive, and we have this kind of combination of beautiful perception and of warmth that heals the brain. So what we're going to do now is we're going to step into the second piece of learning that I have for you tonight, which is about the default mode network, which is about the brain's automatic voice. And so the default mode network shows you here which areas of the brain light up when the automatic voice comes. We're going to talk about the way the brain is a conglomeration of many different systems that are working alternately or simultaneously. In this case, the default network does not play particularly well with others. It is its own deal, and we can learn to mobilize it for good. And people that have experienced a lot of warmth and precision and a lot of resonance have an easy time with their default network. But the more we have experienced trauma, the harder it is to deal with the default network. And the default network can be the home of a particularly nasty species of self-critical witness. So first of all, I'd like you to understand, this is a picture of the networking of a brain. This is a human brain. Our brain runs in big interdependent systems called networks. And so here's some examples of, like, the visual network is this pink that you see, and then the default network is the orange, and the dorsal attention network is the green, just so you get a sense that the brain is networked and there are different ways that the brain works. Here's another picture of the default network for you so you can start to get a sense. It's the purple in this area show you the default network, and then the focused attention is in the blue. What does the default network do? It automatically integrates our social world with our sense of self. There's nothing like the default network to take us into a deeper understanding of ourselves. it's like a kind of a tailor that's sitting there inside of our brain in these, bringing together these areas that were lit up in the previous pictures. And it's sewing us into our life. It's taking our past experiences and our present experiences and our future experiences, and it's sewing together our sense of self based on what has happened with us and what we anticipate happening with others. So what happens when the default network is working to our benefit? It gives us daydreaming and night dreaming. It helps us remember what has happened, realize what we've forgotten, helps us think about the future, imagine different scenarios for our lives. It lets us think about why people do what they do, and it lets us have creative thought. However, sometimes the default network does not work so well, in which case, and this is a wonderful drawing that's from my book trailer on yourresonantself.com if you want to see the whole book trailer. It's really fun. So when the default network has been traumatized, then what it does to us is very different than letting us dream, have creative thinking, integrate stuff, remember stuff. Instead, it does uncontrollable mind wandering. It wakes you up at 3 o'clock in the morning telling you everything that you did wrong yesterday, every social cue that you missed. It's relentless self-criticism and self-reproach. It brings in anxiety about the future. It is the home of the intrusion of painful memories that come with post-traumatic stress. Makes it really hard to stay focused and track what's going on. Like probably multiple times during this call already, you have heard my voice and then you drifted away. You started thinking about what you're making for your mother-in-law's dinner and whether or not she's going to like the roses. And you remembered that, oh my God, you lost that receipt for that really important piece of your taxes, and now your accountant's going to be mad at you and you don't want to tell him. So this is the default network. Every time that your brain has slipped out of the gear of connecting with me and following this incredible, interesting information that I am giving you, that is your default network. And it is trying to save your life. It is trying to make sure that whatever it is that it is worried about that you did in the past, you will not do again. And it wants to do this by beating you mercilessly. That is the whole point of a traumatized default network. It wants to make sure that all the pain never happens again. So the default network actually comes online on the very first day of human life. It may even be online in the womb, but they haven't done the MRIs of the little babies inside the womb with their brains to show us. But they've done some MRIs on 1-year-old babies, and they know that those little babies already have a default mode network that's working. And in addition, it works for all of us whenever we have as little as 1 second of downtime from intentional external use of our brain. So I'm trying to bring you all these beautiful images and stuff that are supposed to keep you interested. And this shows you algebra problems that you could be working. And if you were working these algebra problems right now, then whenever you would pause, working the algebra problems is one network. And whenever you would pause, then the default network would come on. So here's the default network. Boom. As soon as you lose your focus, the default network slips into gear. And if you have any trauma around algebra, then we've given you a nice little cue to slip into your traumatized default network, for which I am just going to rescue you by changing the slide. Okay. When we pay attention to something external, the default network stops working. So, like when we're paying attention to algebra problems, then the default network isn't working. If we're reading a novel, the default network is turned down. If we're watching a movie, default network turned down. These activities give us a rest from the relentless default network. The times when you will hear the default network most clearly are when your body's doing something automatic that your brain doesn't need to focus on. So when you're waking up, when you're falling asleep, when you're showering, driving long distances in your car, when you can't get a radio station and you forgot your CDs, washing dishes, doing other mindless repetitive tasks, it'll kick in really intensely when we feel like we've made mistakes, or when others correct us, and also the default network kicks in really intensely when people don't do what they told us that they would do, and then we experience disappointment and shame. Oh, that's a really intense moment of being in connection with the default network. So sometimes, if we've lived through enough trauma or loneliness, the default network can strip the flesh from our bones with its intensity. And this is what can make the attempt at mindfulness practices akin to torture. If you have an intense enough default network, then it can be really torturous to ask yourself to sit down and begin to try to meditate. It just is like you're like opening the doors to hell. And then, sometimes we've gotten that part mastered and we're really good at mindfulness practice. But as soon as we stop the mindfulness practice, which is a different network than the default network because it's intentional, then boom, we're in hell again. So either way can be true. What's really interesting is that there's research that shows that people will even shock themselves rather than endure their own mind. So people will go, so this is a research study that was done where the researcher invited the wonderful, I will be the research participant, and I'm going in, and the researcher says to me, Sarah, can I give you $65 to shock your ankle with this electrical shock device in a little room? I'm in a little white room with nothing in it but the electrical shock device and the researcher. And I say, no, thank you. I really don't want my ankle to be shocked. And the researcher says, oh, okay, that's just fine. And so what I'd like to do, I need to take your cell phone and your purse here. We're going to put it in a nice little locker for you out here, and it'll be safe for you. But we can't have you have those things in there with you right now. You're going to have to wait about 15 minutes while I do some paperwork to let you go now. And so the researcher closes the door. There I am inside of the little white room. No cell phone, no book, nothing to do, no magazines, nothing to do. 67% of people who are locked in that little white room, 67% of the people who have told the researcher that they will not allow themselves to be shocked for the paltry sum of $65, 67% of those people, in their boredom and their desire to escape their own mind, will shock themselves. So I hope that made you laugh just a little moment in enjoyment. I realize, I can't see you, so I'm just hoping that you're doing okay out there. And I'll pause for some questions in just a moment. So the other thing that's nice to know, because of course many of us have teenage and boys and girls in our lives, or even partners who become very obsessed with video games. There is nothing as effective as video games for turning off the default network. It is a magical way to escape our own mind. The other substance that helps with default network turning off is nicotine. Video games and cigarettes, yes, the most effective activity and substance for turning off the default mode network. And nicotine turns on the visual attention network, interestingly enough. So people often do have to figure out how to manage their traumatized and critical self-witness. They often do have to do this. So this is some of the ways that they do it. They indulge in different kinds of activities. They indulge in different kinds of substances that help to get that default network turned off. Alcohol turns off the default network. Cocaine turns off the default network. Cigarettes, as we mentioned, shopping, everything that makes dopamine flow activates, we're going to learn about this in the long-term course, activates the left hemisphere. Left hemisphere takes us out of the default network because it's our doer rather than our beer. The more that we get to integrate our default network, the more we get to live in a world of our own magical and sweet creation, and an integrated world that's integrated with others. It's a very sweet thing that begins to happen as we heal, where we get to have access to the default network, but it's no longer toxic. It's no longer Edward Scissorhands. It's no longer trying to lacerate us or slice us to pieces. Instead, it's allowing us to access our full capacities of memory and synthesis, for creativity, for relational connection. All kinds of really sweet things await us as we travel on this journey. So the more that we hold our default network with warmth and ourselves with warmth, the more rich and satisfying our lives are. So I'll pause for just a moment and see if there are any questions. And if there aren't any questions, Robin, maybe we could grab just one or two comments so that I know I'm not alone here, just for a little minute.
Right, just to remind everybody how to raise their hands. So if they would like to ask a question, if you're on the Zoom video screen, move your mouse around, activate the menu at the bottom. You'll see participants, click that, and at the bottom of the list of participants, you'll see raise hand. You could also enter questions into the chat or comments into the chat. That can be found at the bottom of the screen as well. Chat, it'll open up in a box. Use the drop-down list to say everyone and type in your message and press enter. I have been seeing some comments in the chat, a few just really saying how happy people are to be here and that they're really looking forward to your presentation. And it's been amazing to me so far. So raise your hand if you'd like to ask a question. And
or if you're willing for me to hear your voice so that I know that I'm not alone.
Yep, I see a few hands up. I saw Sophia's first. Sophia, you're unmuted.
Oh, Sophia.
Hi.
Hi.
You're not alone.
Ah, thank you. I'm very happy.
Yeah. It's happy to see your face too. The question I have is that I often think about why people do things.
Okay.
And I'm a little confused. Is that what part of my brain is that?
That's your default network. It's social. It's socially trying to make sure that you're safe by understanding your social world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I don't like it.
Oh, well, just for a moment, tell me if you can access it just for a little moment right now. Like, what can you feel in your body when you tune into that voice?
Oh, I feel very anxious.
And
I'm trying to figure out why they're doing what they're doing.
Yeah.
Whether it's them or me.
Right. Oh, yeah, really needing that clarity.
Yes.
Would your body like some acknowledgement that it has been much safer if you have lived in a world where you really understand what the heck people are doing?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
And how does, just kind of tell me how's your body respond?
I'm sorry, what?
Oh, how does your body respond? What's happening now?
Yeah. My whole body's relaxing.
Yeah.
And I have a few tears and I feel my shoulders go down.
Yeah. Oh.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Sophia. That's our first little baby demo. We'll just do some baby demos. Let's get one more person, Robin, before we go into a bit of a guided meditation for people. Thank you, Sophia. So grateful not to be alone.
Okay, Neil, I saw your hand next. Your line is unmuted.
Thanks. This is more of a question than anything else. Sarah, I heard you use the word precision a few times, I think in connection with self-empathy, and I was curious to learn more about that because I've never thought about self-compassion in connection with a sense of precision.
Oh, thank you for asking this question. There are different areas of our brain that light up depending on what we're feeling. So particularly the amygdala, which is this little organ of emotion and memory that's in the center of the brain, it has different zones for different emotions. So for example, if we're lonely, but we're guessing that we're afraid, then we're not going to get calmer with self-empathy, right? So we need to be tuning into our body and asking the kind of questions that I did have the pleasure of being able to ask Sophia, of like, how is your body doing? So you would say to yourself, you would feel the anxiety and you would go, and interestingly enough, anxiety feels identical to the human body if it's loneliness or if it's fear. It feels the same. So we won't know from the outside, and we need to ask ourselves, Sarah, are you lonely? And then if there's no calming response, because the body calms when we get the right word matched with the information that's coming up from the body, then we might say, okay, Sarah, are you scared? And then there might be a slight shift or change. Oh, yeah, it's much more being scared than it is lonely in this case. But that's a very rough example because our bodies also respond to nuanced understanding of our emotions and our longings. So it may be that we have a longing for warm companionship, whereas the word companionship by itself doesn't bring relaxation. This is the kind of thing I mean by precision. Neil, is this making a little more sense now?
Yeah, it's making a little more sense.
Yeah. Do you have more questions that come up?
Yeah, I mean, certainly, and part of them was the direction you were going about the sometimes the particular words that we use that connect with ourselves don't seem to me always to match with the words that like are in a feelings sheet, that there is a lot more nuance and there's a lot more variability, and that some of that can also be very personal to you, to myself.
That's the beauty of self-empathy. Nobody can be as precise as we can be once we get used to it. Yeah. Did I understand you at all? Did my response give you something?
I think so. I think what I'm hearing you say is that because we know ourselves so well, you're optimistic that we have a better chance of really finding the right words that connect in a way with our feelings that might be harder for somebody else to do.
Yes, it's so true. But it kind of takes a little bit of modeling and a little bit of being held with empathy to kind of, it's almost, I think of it as priming the pump. Does anybody remember those old pumps where you'd pump them and you couldn't get any water to come up, but if you pour some water in, then it creates the capillary action that lets the water come up. It's kind of like empathy does that, I think. We learn from being held with an effort for warmth and precision, even if the other person can't get quite to it. But then we're able to kind of bring out our own response that gets us closer to the mark.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Robin, let's take a little moment for, here's the next slide that just a family, the most important parts of your brain to awaken, and yes, everybody has them, are the circuits of warmth and attachment. And then I'm just going to take you into a very brief, 1-2 minute guided breath meditation now. Oh, this will help me too, because it's so sweet to be in connection with all of you guys, but I cannot see you. So there's a bit of a feeling of panicked blindness and a longing for feedback, I think, and relational connection. So just noticing that you are a breathing being and seeing where you can feel your breath move. If you like closing your eyes, you get to close your eyes. If you don't worry about it. Just feel your breath move and see if you can find where it moves inside. So we want it to feel, sometimes you can feel it right at the edge of your nostrils, and that won't waken the circuits that I want to waken quite as well as if you can get into your upper sinuses, or you can feel it moving in your throat, or you can feel, sometimes people feel their clothes moving across their ribs or their stomach, but go deeper, go inside and see if you can feel the breath itself unfurling in your lungs, making shapes of air in your lungs. Or feel how, when you're belly breathing, how when the diaphragm goes down, it compresses and kind of massages the organs in the belly. Go inside for this. And as you find that inside place where you can feel your breath moving, I invite you to be very, very gentle with your attention, to ask your attention if it is willing to come to this inside place of your breath. And then notice if it just immediately skips away and does something else, and see where it goes. Is it taking you to something that hurts? Is it going, no, we can't pay attention to the breath, the ankle hurts? Or is it going, no, we can't pay attention to the breath because we need to beat up Sarah because she really is doing this badly? Or it might be doing something else, worrying about the future, thinking about what's happening with your family, worrying about work, gently and with warmth. See if you're to acknowledge your attention for its effort to help you, and see if it's willing to come back to your breath. Just invite it back to your breath. Come on back. And now let it go again and allow yourself to notice that here we are, these people, all of us here on this call, bringing our attention with just a little bit of warmth and gentleness to the way that our attention skips everywhere and how we can be really, really kind when we invite it to do things. So, the most important skill that we need to awaken the integrative circuits of warmth and attachment inside of the right hemisphere is resonant language. Learning what is resonant language and learning what is not resonant language. Warmth and precision are what we need to bring together for resonance. Let's think about what the self-critical network, default network has to say to us, and then let's make the really quick little empathy guesses. I'll make a few for some of these things that we're going to hear that the self-critical default network says. The self-critic will say, why did you do that? So your guess might be, Sarah, are you alarmed? Are you really, really worried about Sarah's survival? You are beneath contempt. Self-critic, has Sarah crossed your line? Are you so wanting accountability and dependability? Are you exhausted and you're wanting to be able to depend on Sarah? You can't be counted on. Do you need acknowledgement of hopelessness? Do you need acknowledgement that you've been trying and trying and trying? You're so stupid. Are you on your last nerve with Sarah? Are you really wanting to know that she is a viable being and that she will survive? You did it again. Self-critic, do you need acknowledgement that you are really, really have been committed time and resources to try to stop these patterns from recurring? Are you wanting some effectiveness? You don't deserve to live. Self-critic, are you exhausted? Are you so wanting rest? Do you just want some time and space to breathe without emotional pain? You're wasting your life. Self-critic, are you bewildered and helpless? Are you watching the life choices that Sarah makes? And are you really wanting her to find meaning? You have no value. Do you want to be known, self-critic, for how much you enjoy productivity, contribution, success? You don't deserve to be loved. Self-critic, are you longing for, don't deserve to be loved? Do you need acknowledgement that love has always had to be earned? You don't deserve to be able to breathe. Boy, this is an intense self-critic right here. Hello, Sarah's intense self-critic. Are you so wanting to live in a world where everybody pulls their weight and you can count on everybody, including Sarah, to be fully participatory? Do you get scared when she's immobilized? Do you want action and contribution? You make people sick. Self-critic, are you exhausted and, I want to say disgusted? Are you disgusted? Disgust is a very interesting emotion did 4 days of a workshop exploring disgust and empathy for self-disgust. And what we discovered after the end of 4 days was that self-disgust really does not respond to empathy. Self-disgust does best if you imagine the disgust into a mat, like a mat of bugs and grossness, and you lie it on the floor between yourself and the person, your own self that you have contempt about, say. And you imagine it there on the ground, and then you pick it up and you look underneath it, and you say, what's under this mat of disgust? Terror and just terrifying loneliness. Sarah, do you need acknowledgement that when you were little, your mama got sick and went into the hospital? Do you need acknowledgement that you believed it was your fault? Do you need acknowledgement that it was terrifying, that it's easier to blame yourself than it is to be with the terror? And then we can do this same work, this same beautiful warmth and precision with and I was doing, guesses based on Sarah over here. Your guesses, you might have liked some of my guesses. You might be writing them down. You might be making a note to come back to this on the recording. But you can also, kind of freestyle it with your own voices of your self-critic, kind of based on this pattern of you're listening for, you're not believing that the self-critic is telling the truth. This is primary. This is your primary tip to take home. Remember how we were saying the left hemisphere has no mercy? It also can't be believed. Yeah, it doesn't have the truth. So you have to listen for what the heck's going on with all of this self-laceration? What are the longings and the needs? So voice of shame, I'm too much. Sarah, are you exhausted and overwhelmed? And do you need acknowledgement that it's hard to find people to depend on? Not enough. Sarah, are you... is there a sense that everybody else has standards and ideas that have nothing to do with you? Would you like some acknowledgement that you've been living in a world that doesn't, it's a badly fitting suit? Would you like to live in a world that is like a tailor-made suit, tailor-made for Sarah? Then there's, all those self things like I'm fat, ugly, clumsy, dumb, lazy. Sarah, is it scary to be, sometimes is it scary to be you, and do you have doubt about whether you belong? Do you believe that if you had these qualities of beauty and slenderness and grace and intelligence and productivity that you would be loved? Is it really scary to live in a world where love has always been connected with conditionality? Would you like to fall into love like falling into a giant marshmallow where your body hits it and it just fits you just right? I'm so stupid. This was an interesting one for me. I would walk around saying this all the time. I'm so stupid. I'm so stupid. I'm so stupid. I'm so stupid. When I finally caught it, I was like, why am I beating myself up like this? And I sat with it, and it turned out that I was not actually beating myself up. I was trying to stop the voice of the self-critic from lacerating me to death. I was trying to capitulate. I was trying to say, I give up, I admit this, I'm so stupid, I can't do it, I can't meet your standards, I give up, please stop torturing me. That was so interesting to discover. There's something wrong with me. So just Sarah, do you need acknowledgement that you've received a lot of messages from people telling you there was something wrong with you? Is it hard to find a way to believe that there's right stuff with you, given all the messages that you have received? I'm not as smart as everyone else. Is it scary to be in this world where people's words are so sharp and cut like razors? Are you just wanting a little softness and play and gentleness and exploration and support? I don't belong. Would you like acknowledgement that from the very beginning you have not been sure this is the correct planet for you? Would you like a sense of being able to find your tribe? I don't matter. Is there a need for connection? Is there a need for absolute, consistent, and reliable feedback that you exist and that your voice is important? And would you like to experience people reaching for you and reaching for your voice? My voice doesn't matter, kind of the same thing. My brain doesn't work. Are you exhausted? Do you want to understand the world? I never get it right. Do you feel shame and discomfort? Are you longing for something, a different world where it's not about rightness, where it's actually just about everybody being who they are, not being just right? Oh, so here's an empty O. When the ashamed voice is inaudible, all we can perceive is self-contempt. And when the critical voice is inaudible, all we can feel is shame. So if you notice you're more on the self-contempt side of things, you're probably not even able to perceive your own shame. If all you feel is shame, please know that you have a critical voice that you've not yet been able to hear. So how do we bring warmth and precision to this self-critical voice? Let me just check the time really quick. It's 5:51. So we did a little demo with Sophia, so we'll leave it with that so that we can finish this little piece here. It is important to be able to hear and empathize with both voices. Empathy for the self-critic. So I put some empathy guesses in here that you'll be able to take a look at since we've already gone through the ones verbally. Empathy for the shame. There. What most people don't know is that resonance is incredibly calming. The more resonant humans are with one another, the more they feel accompanied. This is a picture of two cellos because if you play a cello and you have another cello beside it that's not being played, the not being played cello will resonate at the same musical tones as the cello that's being played. And this is how we are as humans. We resonate with these musical tones. And as you can see with this father's hand curling around the child's hand, this is what happens with humans' brains. When we have a parent who's able to be both warm and precise in their understanding of us, it helps to structure our brain in beautiful ways. And as humans, we remain available for exactly this kind of healing and transformation and change for the rest of our lives. It's like we're in the idea of coming into resonant space with one another is a bit like imagining ourselves as a radio station, and we're adjusting our channel to kind of pick up the radiating waves of emotion and experience that are coming off of another person. So we attune ourselves to them, and then we can offer what we're experiencing or imagining for the other person. And when they let us know that, yes, this is something close for us, then we have found resonance. Resonance is a two-person system. Attunement is what one person does to bring themselves into connection with another, and resonance is what happens when it's true. And we do this with ourselves. We can begin to attune to ourselves so that we can create resonance with ourselves. Resonant language is very different from left hemisphere language. When we want to bring words to resonance, we need to have care, as language is largely used to do things rather than to be things. And we want to watch out for reassurance. Here's a cartoon that I love that shows like reassurance. Here's the little child sharing their broken heart, and the parent just sort of contradicting that. It's going to be okay. You're fine. You're a beautiful child. Instead of what we see on the right, the resonance where the parent understands that the child's heart is broken, and then they get to walk together and be understood and understand one another. It's like our brains come together and we share them. So, just going to check here. Our unaccompanied experiences and memories live on within us until we meet ourselves with warmth and precision in difficult places and difficult memories, till we're met with warmth and precision in the areas where we have a sense of needing to be understood. And one of the things that I'd like you to be able to take away is this body-based self-empathy process. And again, these slides are available for download for you. What did you say to yourself? So this is a way to work with self-criticism. What did you say to yourself? Bring attention to your body. Notice. So take one of those phrases that we were working with, if it's one that you say or one that you know that you say to yourself. Sarah, you're so stupid, something like that. What happens in your body when you say it? And what body sensation is most alive? And if this sensation had an emotional flavor or tone, what would it be? And what is the deep need or longing that underlies this experience of shame or discomfort or embarrassment or agony or anger or pain? What's the longing that's there? What is it your brain is longing for you? And what is the deeper longing? What's that first level of longing? The efficiency, the effectiveness, the survival. And what's the deep longing? What would your body love? What radical, inconceivable world would your body love to live in that is not this one? And then after you've kind of done those two levels of wondering, bring your attention back to that phrase and see whether there's any change in your body's reaction to what you have said to yourself. What happens in your body now? And then if it's changed at all, you can follow this through again. Usually it takes a number of pathways, a number of travelings, a number of journeyings through this process to begin to understand both that you have the two voices, the self-critic and the shame, and that you need to have some empathy guesses for each of them in order to relax altogether. So here we are. I'll just check where we are. Here we go. So please remember that there's hope, that I'm not just giving you some theory that just comes from neuroscience. This is the integration of resonant language, of warmth and precision, of feelings and needs coming together with neuroscience. So we have the foundation in research and we have the experiential lived moments of real connection and self-empathy. This is the way that I followed. It's got more elements to it that we'll go over with more detail in the next 6 weeks. But you can use these tools that I've been presenting tonight without going on in the 6 weeks to learn to hear the longings under the critical voice, give the ashamed voice sweet self-empathy, and over time turn both voices into your compassionate advocates. I am not sure exactly why you showed up for this call, but I hope that some of what I've said has been helpful. I want you to know that this is the secret that I found, this combination of neurobiology and NVC, which helps me turn the volume down on my brain's self-critical noise and turn toward myself with warmth. That going on this journey and discovering this secret has literally changed my life and the lives of my clients. And starting, it's so sweet to hear. Somebody shared on Facebook that they had an Ethiopian friend who started to read this book and that it changed their life, the first 3 chapters. So I'm very excited about the book as well, being a resource for you. This is something that you can do. It's a process that's learnable and reproducible. You can, using this approach that intertwines warm and precise self-empathy with a solid ground of relational neuroscience, be in the same place using this process. So you're probably asking, how do I apply this to my life? You can do it slowly with trial and error based on the concepts I've outlined in the preview course, or you can have the supportive learning and practice context in the upcoming NVC Academy 6-week course, Your Resonant Self, Transforming the Critical Inner Voice, which starts next Wednesday, and also is fully recorded for those of you who would like the recording. Let me just check in and see here. Yeah, I think that we're turning to you now, Mary.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you so much. I love how practical and in one way simple, but also profound your process is. And I love that blending of nonviolent communication and neuroscience as a form of deep healing. Healing things that maybe for a lot of us, we didn't even think was possible to heal. So thank you very much, Sarah. So I'm curious, what are the other concepts that you'll be covering in the 6-week course? I'm assuming you'll be covering this same topic to a little more degree, but then what other topics will be covered?
Yes.
That explore to help develop that self-understanding and compassion.
Absolutely. We'll learn about self-care in week 1. In week 2, we'll learn more about living with a relentless self-critic and how to shift what it's like to live with a relentless self-critic, how we get stuck in the past, and how to get free. Week 4, we'll be looking at the way that trauma fractures the sense of self and what needs to happen in order to begin to reunite the pieces of the brain that have been fractured by trauma. We'll talk about managing our life energy in week 5 and how we often try to use self-criticism to keep ourselves small enough to be acceptable and how to shift that. And then week 6, we'll do general troubleshooting and look in particular at the sacred vows that limit life energy.
Wow. That is that just sounds so life-changing and full, your agenda. Yes. I wonder if you would talk about the structure of your class. What do you expect the structure to be? What can people expect?
Sure. The structure includes, let's see here.
You could advance the slide maybe, Sarah.
Yes, that's right. So there's this little question here about when does it meet, which is 6 sessions, Wednesday from 5 to 7, October 11 to November 22, and not meeting on November 8. Okay, so class structure. We'll start out with a little guided meditation, short, simple, something different each week to help us more deeply understand the concepts we're working with. We'll do an overview of our neuroscience concept. Today was the default mode network. We'll do a little bit of a demo. There'll be practicing in pairs, or for people who don't want to work in pairs, there's a little bit of time to journal. And then there'll be Q&A. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And who do you think would most benefit from this course?
I think that the people that would most benefit from this course would be people who struggle with shame, and those people will feel more freedom and compassion. People who experience using compulsions to manage their own inner hell, they will start to create an internal structure that will make their bodies calmer and their minds easier. People who have been confused about why things are so hard will have new information to support understanding. People who worry about loved ones and their critical voices will have new tools for empathizing with and supporting their loved ones. And people who love to learn about the brain experientially will be delighted and find the new information fun and easy to digest, as I hope it was this evening.
Thank you, Sarah. I have another question for you. You've mentioned neuroscience and you've also mentioned nonviolent communication. Is it important for people to come to this class with experience in either of those programs?
No, this class is completely available to anyone who is interested in what we've gone through tonight in the preview class, or just who is tantalized or interested. It's completely available, accessible to anybody.
Excellent. Yeah, I'm really happy to hear that. Yeah. So would you go to the next slide, Sarah?
Sure.
And
continue. How much does it cost?
Go ahead.
$350 for 6 weeks, 12 hours of class time. But if you register now, you will receive a 20% discount, which means that it is only $280 if you register by October 6th. And there's a coupon code, Sarah20, to get this special discount.
Yeah, so this is a 20% discount for people, just for people who registered for this call. It was the early bird registration price, but we are extending it for people who registered for this call.
Oh,
so thank you.
Yeah.
You want to go to the next screen?
Sure.
And so to register, you would go to this link. You could also just go to nvcacademy.com and search for it there. And we already went over that. So actually, I'm wondering, is there any final thing you'd like to say about your class, Sarah? And I'm noticing we have a little bit of time, so I'm pretty excited. I'd like to take a few questions specifically about the 6-session class, if you're up for that.
Oh, totally up for that.
Okay, well, let's start there. So does anybody have a question about the 6-session course, either about the structure or what Sarah will be covering or what it will be like? And while we're waiting, raise your hand if you would. And while we're waiting for hands to come up, just a reminder that everybody who registers will have access to all the recordings, no matter if you can attend them or not. And it goes from 5 to 7 o'clock Pacific time on Wednesday evening, starting October 11th. Robin, would you call on Betsy?
Yes, Betsy, your mic is open.
I didn't really have a question per se, but I did want to thank Sarah for many things, but in particular, I found myself resonating very much with the visuals and how there was not my left brain wasn't engaged with those visuals, my right brain was, and they really helped me absorb the materials that you were saying. So thank you for those visuals.
Oh, Betsy, thank you. That's one of the things I love about the visuals, that we get to do that. I'm so grateful to hear that. Thank you.
Yeah, and also, Sarah, there's a question in the chat from someone. She says, would it be helpful to read a corresponding chapter in your book for each session?
Oh, what a sweet question.
I know, I like that question too.
I would be happy to review that. It looks like very much so that the weeks 1 through 6 are very close to chapters 1 through 6 with a little bit of dodging around. Yeah.
Okay. And also, I see that Karen has a question, Robin.
Okay, yep, I'm going to unmute Karen. I also want to say there was a question that came to me. How do partnerships work? So at some point, let's answer that. And let's open up Karen's line.
Yeah, so I was curious about how the pairing process would work. For me, community and connection is really important. So I'm just wanting to know how that fits with what you envision for the course.
Oh, thank you. First of all, Robin, you help people with pairing, don't you?
Yep, I can certainly support that.
So the idea would be to just that Robin will hit some buttons that allow people to go into a small place where they would get to speak with one another, a small separate video or audio link. Is it video or audio?
So I think we're talking about during the sessions, it would be breakout sessions. And essentially we end up putting people in their own little rooms to do work together.
And do they see each other on video?
It'd be just like this, just
cool.
in their own little room, just 2 or 3 people in a room.
So then what happens there is that everybody gets a chance to speak and to be heard, and then comes back to the larger circle. And then there would be a little bit of sharing about how it was to be in the small breakout groups. My experience is that what that does is it makes a little more texture to the evening and to the class, and keeps the brains engaged, because you're not just in receptivity mode. How's that to hear, Karen? Is it alarming or is it kind of fun, or what's your response?
Well, I don't know. It's, I guess, maybe calming in a sense to understand kind of how the
How it works.
actual logistics of it will happen.
Yeah. Good.
And also, Karen, or for anybody else who's listening to this, just know that anybody can opt out of being put in a breakout like what Sarah is talking about, and could do some journaling during that time. So that option is available.
Yeah. I get a little alarmed sometimes when I'm put with somebody that I don't know yet. It goes past fairly quickly, but sometimes it's a little higher threshold than I'm able to do. So I'm glad to have that journaling option. Thank you, Mary.
Thanks, Sarah. And also we have a question from John Moody from Southern California. Hi, John.
Thank you so much. Hey, Sarah, what happens to the default network when we do mindfulness meditation?
Well, we're shifting out of the default network when we do mindfulness meditation because we're asking our brain to do something in particular rather than to do nothing. So it's but it does tend to have a mindfulness meditation in the long term, particularly mindfulness meditation that includes some element of warmth, tends to be very integrative and soothing for the default network. But if there's no integrated self-warmth in the mindfulness meditation, then it can leave the default network fairly lacerating. How is this to hear, John?
Thank you, but I got another question. Does heart rate variability get into this act?
Yes, heart rate variability is part of week 5, and it's part of the understanding the vagus nerve, which we will be looking at, and this managing of the life energy. How do we make ourselves smaller with our lacerating self-witness? Yeah, so we'll be able to look at that in more detail as well. Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, John. And Robin, what was the question, the written question? We just have a couple minutes left, so let's take that.
Something about partnership.
Right, that was exactly the question. How do partnerships work? I'm guessing that might have been a reference to how are we doing the partner work like in the breakout room. So that's a guess.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think just in this last minute, I just want to remind you that, and I see one more hand up. So let's talk with Lisa, and then I'll do my closing.
Hi, thank you, Sarah. This is wonderful.
Oh, Lisa, thank you.
Yeah, I was just making me think of how it's like if I'm really, really, really busy during the day, maybe what you're calling the default network is like really loud once I finally lay down for bed.
Yes.
And if I've actually had a slower, some spacious time, or just some more care and gentleness, and it's not just go, 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 then my mind in those kind of, showering or going to bed is actually more quiet. It doesn't feel like it's the full, so it's it's like if I'm kind of actually present with myself, the default network doesn't seem as chaotic. But if I've just been in go mode, it's super fast. It doesn't have
so much of a backlog to deal with.
It's I got a lot to tell you.
That's right.
Yeah, so that's what came up that's one of the things that came up for me. So
thank you, Lisa. I love hearing that. Yeah.
Thank you, Lisa. And then Genevieve, and I'm trying to figure out how to say it in French, Genevieve, possibly, wants to know if you would have an issue with somebody who speaks French primarily and maybe struggles with English. And I say no. How about you, Sarah?
Oh, no problem. And I love to be slowed down. The English speakers love it too. I can get going. So it's really good to have somebody go, wait, don't go so fast.
Yeah, I agree with that. Thank you.
And I'd also offer that oftentimes we can pair people with their native languages too. So if more than one person shows up who natively speaks French, then I'm more than glad to pair you together.
Oh, that would be
important that way too.
Yeah.
Thank you, Robin. So I just want to remind everybody that Sarah's 6 sessions course starts next Wednesday. It runs from 5 to 7 p.m. Pacific time, which for those outside of the country, it's California time. And because you attended this session or registered for the session, if you register by October 6th and you use coupon code Sarah in capital letters 20, Sarah 20, you'll get a 20% discount. And so we hope you'll sign up. This class, this is just one session, and there's a lot more to come. And so we really hope you'll sign up. Sarah, any final thoughts or words?
Oh, I am so delighted and honored that you chose to spend your evening with me and looking at this material. This is just like a small bite of the amazement that awaits.
Excellent. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you so much for this class tonight. And thank you, Robin, for your technical support and all you do to support us in the background.
Thank you, Robin.
And thanks to all of you who attended tonight. Thank you so much for being here with Sarah and me and with each other. And we look forward to seeing you next week.